Hey everybody, Cody Menz here, and I have another video showing off a new upcoming first ever Tier 8, or I guess first ever Czechoslovakian Tank Destroyer. This happens to be an upcoming Tier 8 Premium or Reward Tank, most likely a Premium Czechoslovakian Tank Destroyer. It's called the ShPTK-TVP. This tank is going to be pretty unique when it comes out, regarding, both the gun, the mobility. Being a Czechoslovakian tank, a lot of the tanks are pretty mobile. This kind of fits that bill too. Wargaming's description that they currently have in here, which this is on the 1.16 common test server. This tank's most likely being added just for super testers and basically future testing. It's not going to be coming out anytime super soon, from my understanding. They're in the kind of final stages. The model's done. Most likely this is going to be either a straight sale, possibly a marathon, most likely just a premium tank, maybe preceding a Czechoslovakian tank destroyer line in the future. Their description that they have in here, essentially it was originally developed, the TVP kind of series in the 1945, and they were essentially instructed to start working on SPGs. Hey, maybe we'll see a Czechoslovakian SPG line. Everyone would love that. And also tank destroyers. This project specifically involved a 100mm gun melted to a welded, fully rotating turret with an open top. And this vehicle was supposed to be very mobile. This tank, does have that fully rotating turret, open top, so you can't put vents on it. Does free up a slot though for something like turbo, which would be pretty interesting to make this thing go even faster. Or, another piece of equipment. But this tank is pretty interesting. These probably aren't going to be the final stats, for when, this thing comes out. This is just kind of a quick little video to kind of go over, the tank. It only does 250 damage per shot. Very rare, very weird, or I guess I should say for a tier 8 TD to do that. It does have a crazy, so this is just the standard ammunition, 270 millimeters per pen. That's pretty nuts when it comes to a standard pen with that low alpha for a tier 8 TD. Very unique. Does have crap gun depression, relatively speaking. Almost non-existent aim time at 1.25 seconds, coming off of the most recent WZ-114. Pretty huge change. Good accuracy. DPM's pretty good considering the very low alpha. Pretty non-existent hit points and armor. And it does have some mobility behind it. 55 kilometer top speed, which isn't the top of tier 8 TDs, but it is high up there. Really high specific power. Decent traverse speed. Camouflage is okay, not best in class. It is a fairly beefy tank, so the camouflage takes a little bit of a hit, and V range is just average. So jumping into a comparison tool here, and when it comes down to getting into like the meat of this, when it comes to soft stats that you can't see within this, when it comes to like terrain resistance, they're actually really freaking good. So you don't have to worry about this getting screwed over by terrain resistance. And the on-the-move accuracy of this tank is actually pretty freaking good too. It's comparable to a decent on-the-move accuracy value for like an American medium, something like that. So you're not going to get beat up too much with accuracy penalties and movement penalties across different terrains. So this tank, is there really a great, I guess, peer to this tank or comparison? I don't know. Yeah, maybe I missed something, but I threw in a Scorpion. Why the hell not? Tier. It's got a turret. It's fast. Super Hellcat. Yes, it's a tier lower. However, when it comes down to it, it's not too far off with the damage per shot. And I think this is almost like a super Hellcat. Mega Hellcat. I don't know. Ultimate Hellcat. Something like that. And I threw in a couple mediums here too. So low alpha KBZ, just because relatively speaking, very low alpha for a tier 8 medium. Decent, when it comes to the, rate of fire. Also, you know, DPM, stuff like that, accuracy and mobility. So I feel like this kind of feels like, you know, tier 8 tank destroyer's version of a KPZ 10, or not 107, 07 RH. Doesn't line up specifically stat wise, but same general concept. And then an Indian Panzer, you know, when it comes to the gun, same damage and stuff like that. But getting into the meat of this tank. So when it comes to the ammunition, so your base round, 270 you know, millimeters of base pen on this. That's pretty freaking good. When it comes to the shell velocity, it's just okay. You know, a little under 900 meters per second. So not the best. When it comes to the penetration drop off, so it doesn't really drop off much, you know, the penetration, which is pretty good. It drops down to 250. Now, getting into the premium round, so 330, that's really good. Again, lower shell velocity, you know, just under 800. Not the slowest, but it's not going to win any awards. There's rounds that basically almost double that, you know, for some APCR rounds at tier 8 and, you know, higher. But 330, really good on pen. And then something interesting. So you go from this, looking at this, 250 damage, you know, standard AP, and then also heat. And then you go to 420. That's a huge jump. Usually you don't see a 250 damage jump all the way to 420. 100 millimeter for the HE round. And the shell velocity for this is 900. So a pretty decent shell velocity considering your heat round is only about 800 and your standard round about 900. So all in all, you know, this thing actually has a pretty interesting HE round. You know, very high damage considering the base round, you know, damage. Decent penetration as well, especially given the caliber. So it's actually got a very interesting HE round. You know, it's going to shred light tanks, possibly, you know, medium tanks depending on where you're hitting them, and, you know, heavy tanks if you can flank them and stuff. And with that reload, you know, you're dumping out a massive amount of DPM, you know, especially if you get your reload, you know, under 5 seconds. Once you start adding a crew, or a good crew, equipment, you know, possibly food, stuff like that, you can get your reload time under 5 seconds. The base value here is a 5.75. Now, all of these just have basic crews. They do have camouflage on all of them, just because I couldn't remove it from the Super Hellcat. Not that this is a direct comparison, but as far as this tank goes, so the gun depression, a little bit low at 6 degrees. So that's a little bit of a knock against this tank. And just stacked up against these tanks here. So really low alpha for a tank destroyer. Decent alpha for a medium. You know, it's not too out of line for what a lot of tier 8 mediums have, just single shots, but it is towards the lower spectrum when you add in all tier 8 tanks, TDs, mediums, heavies, everything. It is low, but the penetration is top notch. Aiming time, again, one of the best aiming times. It's pretty much non-existent. Dispersion's really good. You know, 0.32's pretty darn good. It's not perfect. As you see, there are better ones here, and it's not far and beyond, you know, really good. It's just good. DPM, though, is really nice. As you see, it's got a lot of DPM here to work with. It's got to make up a little bit for being a TD with 250 alpha. Hit points, nothing to see here. Not great hit points. It's not the worst in the class. It's not the best. Pretty much no armor whatsoever, even though this is thicker than, say, a Scorpion. You're not going to be bouncing, you know, many if any shots. And then when you get down to one of the important elements about the tank, so the mobility. Specific power is pretty good. It gets beat by the Super Hellcat obviously here, but the Super Hellcat gets screwed by hidden terrain resistance. This tank does not. So mobility is actually really good. The top speed, you're going to be hitting this somewhat easily from what I can gather, where you might be wanting to put a turbo on this to get a little bit more out of your top speed, especially because you don't have to put vents on this tank since it's an open top tank. You don't have that option, so you could run something like a rammer optics because you're going to be moving around a lot, and then a turbo, or you could replace the turbo You know, some people might do like low noise exhausts, you know, or some people like binocs or camo net, you know, depending, because it is a turret at TD. You can kind of bush camp, stuff like that. Or you can do a improved rotation mechanism. You know, there's a lot of different equipment setups because you don't have vents, you know, to kind of throw in there, like a lot of people do with TDs. Traverse is actually pretty darn good. You know, this thing kind of straddles the line between a light tank destroyer, I guess is what you could consider it, light TD, and like a medium. It's kind of a different type of tank. Wargaming is really on a roll with releasing, I guess, unique tanks that don't really fit a existing, I guess, tank role within that role at that tier. So this kind of fits the bill. Camouflage is good. You know, if you exclude the Super Hellcat here, a little bit worse than the Charioteer, but better than something like a Scorpion. And when it comes to the V range, nothing, you know, against the tank. Like, it's not great. It's your typical TD. Overall, though, you know, this tank, you know, most likely it's going to be a premium tank, maybe a marathon, maybe just straight sail. A lot of people are thinking Czechoslovakian TDs might be the next tank line, because apparently there's enough, I guess, prototypes, blueprints, you know, stuff that Wargaming can pull from to at least make like a miniature 2, 3, maybe 4 tank, you know, tank line out of it. Maybe even more. You know, when it comes down to it, were these tanks ever really built, you know, fielded, stuff like that? No. But, you know, it seems like if they're going to be basing this tank off of, or if we're basing what we could see out of Czechoslovakian TDs, this tank, low alpha, high pen, good HE round, good mobility, but no armor, maybe crap gun depression, and low shell velocity to kind of counter balance that. So in any event, hopefully you enjoyed this. You know, maybe you're going to be interested in this tank, and maybe we'll find out more about it, you know, at some point in the future. You know, being that this is the first time that we've seen it added into the public game files, might be a little while till we see it, any official news coming out about it. Thanks again for watching. Have a good one. See you around.